Good morning, everyone. Microphone check. Did I actually unmute it this time? Talking to myself for a second. There we go. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Looks like everything's working this time around. Had a little bit of an issue with the VIP link this this morning. I got all that updated, so it might take a couple extra seconds for people to trickle in this morning, but we should be all right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome. Hey, SSFTG family. How's it going? Hopefully you all had a chance to rest up, get ready for the day ahead, all that fun stuff. As per the usual, make sure to read through the morning prep PDF on the right side of the screen. Very important to go through and understand everything that is inside there. And then just a quick note for you all as well, before we jump on in today on the YouTube side of things. The stream does have between like a 5 and 30 second delay, which will definitely impact the timeliness of what I may be talking about at any given moment. And then, of course, I also want to take a second, like we do every day, to thank all of our new members, subscribers, Academy students, VIPs, and everyone in between. Thank you all so much for the support. I'm super excited to have you all on board. Welcome to the SSFTG family. If you aren't a member yet, you do have several different options to check out if you're looking to further your trading education and career. The easiest way is to start out, or at least the easiest way to start out, is to join as a member on YouTube. You can get into the chat room and a bit more behind-the-scenes stuff on what's going on. Or for more information on how we do everything in our trading approach with over 19 hours of course material, video course material, swing over to the main page at ssftg.com for more info there. So whether you're here for the very first time or you're one of the VIP vets over on the dedicated stream, which everyone's still kind of trickling into that one yet, had to restart it, but I'm glad to have you trading alongside of me today, analyzing these crazy markets of ours. Let's take a look at some news, take a look at some charts, see what's all going on for today. Don't forget to grab your morning DP levels. Those are posted for you this morning on the Major 7. NASDAQ, S&P, Gold, Crude, Euro, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. I still give Ethereum the most credence, huh? Looking at the news calendar, we don't have a whole lot going on, but at 10 o'clock we do have the CB Consumer Confidence for August forecasted at 124. The previous was 129.1. It is Tuesday, so we have the API weekly numbers for crude coming out, forecasted negative 2.833. And that'll give us a good heads up in terms of what to expect for tomorrow. Now, if you were watching in the Discord chat this morning, was talking about how the NASDAQ has finally made it back to L2. And they finally made it back to L2, and they did it at 7 in the morning. You'll notice my first entry was actually over here, and then I was trying to take care of things, and I missed taking profit into this rally higher. I only had one contract, so I really wasn't able to do a whole lot. And so I just kind of let it ride, looking for a 3-to-1, which is a bit further up, and it couldn't quite make it. When it dipped back down, that was the chance to try to build in, but it dipped down a lot further than I wanted it to, cracking below a low, so I minimized the majority of it back at around a scalper's target, and now I'm just letting this last portion go to see if we can get that rotation back to the upside. But, I mean, realistically, if this can't get the job done now, they're going to have an even harder problem. Technically, the L2 is valid until L3 hits, right? But, I mean, at this point, we've already had a fantastic rally off of L2 initially that I missed taking profit into. And now I've got the secondary rotation, which I've taken some profit into in terms of like a scalper's objective, but nowhere near what this was over here. So I've got to make sure that we've got, you know, I don't have greed clouding my judgment here. I've got to stay where the market's telling me to stay. And right now, given my final entry point and the objectives to the upside, I've got to make sure that I'm at least getting 91.5, if not further. The nice thing is the upside objective is a lot further up and could keep going. But just so we're on the same page, the L2 bounce is going. We were talking about that in the chat room. It didn't go as nicely as I wanted it to, primarily because I missed the majority of it over here. It is what it is, right? Nothing you can really do about it. But as the market starts churning around here, the bulls are still looking to try to get this thing going. Ooh, I already have it there. Let's drag that a little further. But at this point, given the fact that it's moved all the way up now, if it breaks down to another new low, I'd be giving back 14. So that's fine. But the upside objective is still much, much further up. And if it breaks a new low, there's too many problems. No, stop picking up the freaking stop. Get the drawing object. Come on now. There. All right, so around 94 quarter-ish. Let's see if they can make it up there. I'll do an MIT just because I'm not going to be paying attention to it while we're going through the rest of the morning prep stuff. Anyway, starting off and taking a look at the S&P and seeing what's going on here, we've got some really, really good continuation to the upside. Hey, Zach, how's it going? Steven, welcome. Yeah, it's the micro side of things. It's a little bit different. We've got some more flexibility. Technically speaking, even going up to 10 contracts, you're still only in one. It offers up a lot of nice flexibility, but it also offers up the ability to do that kind of stuff where we can build into these larger trades. Which is what I was trying to do all day yesterday, for God's sakes, but it happened at 7 in the morning the next day. At least it didn't happen at 3, At least I was able to get something out of it. Ugh. Anyway. We've got the S&P really, really rallying nicely to the upside, and nicely is an understatement. I mean, this thing has got the rocket booster strapped on full throttle with nitrous going through it, and this solid fuel engines are gone, and the liquid engine, I mean, everything is on full tilt, right? This thing has not stopped going to the upside. We left behind that POC back at 44.83, and that's arguably where ignition started. We were kind of churning around back and forth. We needed a valid attempt. I talk about this all the time. We need a valid attempt from the sellers. They finally got that valid attempt from the sellers. It totally failed. And, well, that failure move has gone all the way up. Now, we were talking about how this move up could see a 1-to-1 off of that volume. I still think it's more realistic to look at it from the perspective of a 618. I don't necessarily believe that they're going to go way that far up. Now again, don't count the market and never say never, because it will. but realistically, you got to pay a little closer attention to where we are in the bigger picture. And a 618 fits perfectly with those larger upside objectives. So, not necessarily a full 1-to-1 move to the upside, although it is possible. A 618 makes a little more sense. If the market is going to pull back aggressively, it makes a lot more sense that it's going to pull back to that previous POC close to the 80s, maybe even the 90s, depending on where they want to go. Looking really strong, but the pullback is here. Speaking of, here comes gold, dipping to the downside, and gold catching a really, really nice drop. Remember where we are in the big picture. This is after that Jumbotron V bottom off the lows, and we needed to prove that V bottom by breaking above the top, but these are all little micro breaks, right? The actual swing high is up here, and it makes it easy visually. It's the orange line. So if we drag that further forward, we still haven't, right? So from a V-bottom perspective, this is holding like about an L5 for the shorts. That's horrendous for the longs, especially if we start breaking to the downside. So the way that this market's kind of moving around and flexing its seller's grip, if you will, if we go back to the drop and kind of work our way further, we can see what are they trying to do here? Do they have any POCs that are changing? Are they moving? What's going on here? Now this is multiple days, so let me put that on minute. There we go. So obviously, I mean, we already know they left behind that POC back at 88.22. But now that we've broken up to a new high, it's nice to see. Has anything changed? It hasn't. So given the lower high and all of these perpetual failures, you can see where's the likely area that these sellers are going to try to pressure down to. Even if we do have a sideways channel, even if there is a slightly, rising support, that's still way down here. So it just doesn't make any sense to be a buyer where it is right now. It's in the middle of no man's land. Unless they build some structure, I guess. But gold's got more room to the downside as far as I'm concerned. Over on crude oil, we've got a continuation to the upside, a little funky gap after the weekend that did fill itself in. It's certainly not anything new for crude getting funky gaps after the weekend. They just had one that we're trying from the beginning of the order flow. This is a break above the top, and hang on a second. Let me see where my other trade's at. Okay. We've got this nice continuation to the upside. We've got the POC. They shifted the POC. The sellers were trying. They broke above. We had the weekend gap up. They didn't even let it get down to the POC, which makes sense given the gap up over the weekend. They were like, whoa, wait a minute. Hang on now. And it started rallying higher. But, well, then they ran into some problems. They couldn't get to a new high. And that's what all of these bulls needed to see. Now, it isn't the fact that the market can't roll back up from here. It definitely can. This could be a phenomenal little inside trap. We know a lot of traders are going to be looking for a spot to put their stops. What better spot than there, or what worse spot than there or there? And a lot of bulls will be looking to accumulate into that for the assumption that we'll get a continuation up towards the $70 mark. And we're still squeezing the shorts who are stuck from 67.60. They haven't been given a chance to get out. So, I mean, realistically, it makes a lot of sense that the bulls try to take this. It's more about timing right now than anything. And if we look at this from the top going across, the POC is hovering right in the middle, which you would kind of expect, given that we're kind of forming a wedge. So it feels like we need to develop a little bit more here, and if anything, I would rather look at it from the bear side and go across from that side and just see, you know, are the sellers, they've got a valid attempt, the POC's down here, do they close up? This would be a more beneficial launching pad for the bulls if they're going to try to take it. 2 seconds. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. So looking at the euro next, we do have a, well, I mean, it's a full-blown rotation now, right? We've broken above the highs. We've done everything they need to do from that perspective. Now, my one concern is that it's going to do new low, new high, new low, new high, new low, and just kind of megaphone out. But from a trend perspective, we do at least have a shift, right? We did have the previous swing high. It was a bear trend, right? So we're breaking above the top. This is the first or the precursor that trends need to shift, right? It's kind of important to break a new high if they're going to be reversing a bear trend. So if we're going to be continuing this back to the upside, the lowest point that they had was an L2. And in this overall sequence, we had an L1 and then a deeper dip into the L2, and then a new high into an L1, and then a deeper dip into an L2. This last pullback was an L1. I mean, I'm kind of anticipating a deeper dip into L2. That seems to be the common trend. That's the pattern right now. So given that patterning, this L1 seems a bit trippy-trappy. I don't necessarily know that I want to participate there. It's going to make a lot more sense to look for the L2, which lines up on top of the negative half DP. The bottom of the L2 is at the -1. So I would much, much rather wait for down here. That makes a lot more sense, down in the 17,900s. Bitcoin still just kind of churning around, holding a new high. Remember, again, if a trend is going to change, they need to break a new high. Pretty important. They did get that, and we haven't broken a new low yet, but man, it would really be useful to see them turn up and you know, really show that they want to get things going here. Otherwise, we've got some lower highs and just kind of grinding around yet. The overall trend in the short term is still bullish and kind of moving its way up, but in the very short term, off of the highs that formed on the 23rd, we're kind of flagging out a little bit. Just kind of hovering. Looking back at Ethereum, Ethereum is kicking up a little bit, and we're rallying back above the highs, continuing that perpetual trend. Higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs. We're breaking up again. Off to the races we go. Looking good. Really? All right, I'm going to call it there. I didn't realize that it went that close to my target, backed all the way off. I mean, no thanks. I'll just take the 3-to-1 and call it a day. Jeez. So very messy in the way that it formed, but the final one, I'm going to be exiting for a 3-to-1 there. Unfortunately, the way that I had to manage it, I don't have any more contracts to trail. I tried to build in and I tried to manage it as much as possible, but when they start breaking underneath the L2, we are in no longer, or no longer in, whatever, however that sentence is supposed to go, a picturesque setup, which is really what I want to try to focus on for these. And that breakdown under there really kind of disallowed that movement. Not to say that we can't roll back up to a new high, but now look at the overall trend, right? I mean, this doesn't exactly look like the thing that I want to be holding on to longs for too long and give up a fantastic 3-to-1 that misses by 2 ticks, you know? It's just not worth it. Looking at the bigger picture, from the daily perspective, we still haven't gotten that pullback for the L1 off of that rotation. Where in the hell is that stupid drawing? There you are. Wait, that's not it. Wait, what? It ends here. You'd think it'd be right there. Right there. No, maybe down? I can't click on my drawing to save my life. Okay, fine. Really? Now I can click on it. Fantastic. Okay. The L1 is directly underneath that last bull bar. Oh, man. Ooh, that deeper dip, that previous low of day, that is some serious icing on the cake if they can get a trap underneath that low. Oh, man. That previous low of day has got to be eyes out. Big zone of interest. So market continuing up through the 3-to-1. And if you do have multiple objectives, I mean, there are still targets technically all the way up to the highs if they want to get going. My fear is that we have a potential V top that I don't necessarily want to stick into too much with a gigantic POC waiting some 150 points away. I don't really want to be holding bags into that. So I'm okay just taking the 3-to-1 where it is now and saying good enough. I'm not going to get greedy on it. We did finally get the L2. It took a whole day, but we got the L2. Yes! Jeez, oh Pete. Zooming in a little bit closer now because we know that's going to be how we're going to have to approach this. The overall cyclical nature, we've got, about 12 minutes, 11 and a half minutes to go. First pullback was an L1, second pullback was an L1, third pullback was an L2. We kind of broke down the trend a little bit. Now we're continuing up off of those L1s. My concern, again, the previous POC that we're leaving behind and that the bulls are feeling really stuck, this downtrend is still fairly strong enough. And if we're looking at it from a value perspective, the last rally, we've still got some distance, right? This is kind of the hot spot. So they've got some room yet. There we go. And if we're going to be zooming in this close, it might be more beneficial to go to like a 250 or something. Slow it down just a touch, but maybe not. We'll see. We're still kind of getting the lay of the land, but overall, I mean, the patterns are still working. It's just, I don't want to wait a full day for one trade, 10 minutes until the open. Hey, Bram, how's it going? Welcome, welcome. Here it all sits. So we'll give it a little bit of time here to kind of churn around, figure out what it wants to do. Looking across the field here in terms of zones of interest, again, we're hovering on that crude zone of interest. But we've got this overall wedge back and forth, and I mean, honestly, look at the way that this is setting up. Like, if they get a trap underneath that previous low, it's a non-confirmed swing, so that makes it even better, because there's going to be stops under there, and it's a terrible spot for them. And we've got the previous POC at 67.60, and the actual swing low down here. So, I mean, realistically, from a structured standpoint, you've got 67.60 down to the lows here, so what, about 75 ticks or so? Doesn't fit a 3-to-1, but definitively fits a 2-to-1. even inside settlement. So, I mean, there's going to be traders there. I would rather see a 3-to-1, if I'm totally honest. Could I get a 3-to-1 with a target inside of the POC? That's too greedy. Let's just make sure our target's inside the inside settlement. I also want to make sure that there's a fill potential here. That reduces the risk down to 54 ticks with an upside potential of 162. So the probability is a little bit lower. You're probably looking at about 29%, pretty typical for crude in terms of these bigger moves. But in the long run, that math it's totally worth it. So that would be the zone 67.43 or so. As far as the euro is concerned, they're finally starting to pull back a little bit. Remember the overall sequence, the L1 is a little less trustworthy. I'm looking more at the L2 in terms of a zone of interest. And from the L2's perspective, that would be right on top of that -0.5 as well. I mean, that's a really nice spot. Ooh, the rounding sucks, though. I'm going to have to round up 17/900ths. Not much you can do about it. And just because it's the euro and I really don't watch the euro enough, I'm just going to place my orders ahead of time to make sure that they're there. Breakpoints would be in the L3s. From the average, that would be 275 a contract. But upside potential off of an L2 is typically 3-to-1. So if they do get a clean bounce off of this, which is what I would prefer to see, then you would manage it like this. Where it's, you're going to bounce or I don't want it. The upside 3-to-1 in that case would be risking 168.75 for 506.25. Fits a 3-to-1 inside the highs. You might. Can you fit a 4-to-1? You can fit a 4-to-1. 4-to-1 is not usually one that I go for. I either go for 3 or 5. But 4-to-1 does fit, technically speaking, so. NASDAQ continuing to churn higher. Hey, Ace, how's it going? Good morning, good morning. 6 minutes to go until the open. Looking at where we are in the pre-market. We've got a halfway decent kind of bounce. I was trying to get an end-of-day rally. Couldn't get it going. Of course, they did it at, 11 at midnight. Rotten SOBs. We had this really, really nice jump to the upside, which completed a lot of objectives. A lot of bulls were waiting for that. I didn't want to hold overnight. It scares me. I think that's reasonable. And, well, I should have in hindsight, but they did complete the objective to the upside. After that objective was met, everybody took profit. The thing went collapsing all the way down to the lows. Now that we're down here, I mean, again, the concern is that we're dealing with a situation that's more along the lines of, well, first off, this channel is incredibly aggressive. Jeez. Look at this bad boy, huh? Lordy. That's a long one. So in this case, we've got this channel that's been going down and down and down and down. It overextends once, overextends twice, and now we're reversing. It makes a lot more sense that the bulls are taking over here. I mean, realistically, going into the open. Now, as far as the volume is concerned, they're even breaking above the impulse POC. I mean, they're doing everything they need to do. So going into the open, S&P is going to be opening with a downsided gap, but realistically, it's in a nice zone. More continuation to the upside. We've got about 4 minutes to go until the open. Sheesh. I mean, this cycle is... This is a disgusting cycle, I gotta say. And the reason it's so gross looking is because of this hustle bustle back inside here, this little ugh that happened. Because that means that technically speaking, the low has to be here. And this was the highest point inside that median, so it has to be there. So it's just a really disgusting wave 2. And all of this fits wave 3. I mean, realistically, it's gone 4.38, right? 438%. Good fib numbers. So now that we're pulling back, I mean, this is what a lot of traders have been waiting for a long time, getting this dip. I still think this is likely going to be wave 4 into 5, and given that wave 2 was so gross, wave 4 is probably going to be quick. We'll see what they're able to accomplish. Bull cycling so far off of the rip. We've got a, well, the first rally above was an L1. Continued above that into an L2. Then, oh, ooh, they didn't make the L1. Didn't make it. Didn't make it. Now we're starting to pull back. We're inside the L1 again. We don't necessarily have any patterns per se to work off of, but the one thing that does stand out is we're completing some major objectives up here. We've got 928 around the corner. I feel like a pullback at the open would fit really nicely. Also hitting a pretty big volume node up here on the NASDAQ at 606.5. Got bulls continuing the rally up, which means that we've got another L1. It's got an L1 into an L2. Missed it, missed it, missed it. L1. Next pullback, L2. I mean, it fits. So that's the dip zone that I'm looking for more than anything else. Just so we don't confuse this with anything, I am looking for an L2. And before I lose the line again, let me make it so I can see the stupid thing. There we go. Yeah, how's it going, 7? Open in 1 minute. Give me that dippy dip. We want that L2. 1 minute, right around the corner. Because we're dealing with the open, I'm going to optimize the risk to be a little bit lighter. So I can increase the risk down to an L3. So instead of going 3 and 3, this will give me a little bit of a wider perspective going into the open. A lot of volatility. Dipping down into the L3. So again, I took this with slightly reduced risk so that I could approach this in a little bit of a different way. I was only given a chance to get out of the 2 there. That's fine. Looking at the previous move to the upside, they left behind that previous POC around this zone, so I'm not too... I mean, again, I would be a lot more nervous if I hadn't already reduced my risk from the get-go, but I don't necessarily mind this area, and the dip at the open does make a lot of sense. A lot of buyers are going to feel like they missed out on that move. I'm going to drive the risk down a bit more towards these lows. There we go. Got a nice pulse up to reduce a bit of the risk. So again, we had a little bit of a slide again, so I've got to manage it a little bit differently. The thing is, it's yeah, if we're looking at a 1 second chart right now, effectively, it's moving incredibly fast. So that's the only thing that you're really running into right now, is just they're making it very difficult to get out at break evens with enough time. I'll reduce a little bit on that pulse. I'll see if the bulls can follow through a bit more on this secondary drive, though. Nice pop, nice continuation. And that's good enough to reduce the final one. All right. So effectively a small loss between it, but I feel like given the way that the market kind of collapsed in my face, I feel like we managed it all right. I'm willing to accept a loss of what ended up being 14 bucks. Yeah, okay. Your absolute calmness being down 100 ticks. Well, first off, the nice thing is we're on a micro, so, I mean, keep in mind, you've seen me do that on minis too. The important thing is maintaining a very low risk. When your risk is incredibly small, I mean, yeah, if you're looking at the dollar signs, it's going to freak you out, you know? But when I'm looking at it at the tick basis, okay, it's much easier to calm down because you're sort of disassociating it. It's more just inventory at that point. I still think bulls are buying this dip, but that flush was a heck of a lot more aggressive than I want to play ball with. I would rather just accept the fact that this pop is my chance to GTFO, and we'll just let the market figure out what it wants to do after that. You can see I tried to exit it up here. I would have been a lot happier had I just exited everything up there, but it gave me about a millisecond to do it. Well. Heavy drive to the downside. Market piling lower now. They weren't able to break that high. Another continuation down. If we're looking at it from the bigger picture, we're hovering at a... Let me get this down here. The 3.8 would be at around 5.19. We're in pretty wide open, deep ocean territory here. There's not much to hold the market up. So... I mean, again, and this is why I'm so aggressive in getting out in this, I don't want to be holding bags when there's a 150-point drop underneath me, you know? It already made me hold through a bunch of crap I didn't want to hold through. I practice not trading at the open. Yeah, I don't blame you. Market's still herky-jerking around. The big zone of interest, remember, previous low of day. The previous low of day is at 420. Fantastic. Okay. As far as the downsided momentum, we've got an incredible breakdown lower with an L2, and that followed up with an L1. We are now following through with another potential L1, trying to grind this down. The big thing, obviously, if we zoom out a little bit, is that this trend never broke above the previous swing high. They couldn't get it done. This is starting to get a bit avalanche-y. Nice little wedge formation with an overshot on the lows. Bulls will be looking to come in again. Remember, the longer-term perspective is still bullish. I still want to find a reason to be a bull. It's just, you can't do it too soon. Looking at the first 5 POC, now that we've got that in, got that at 67.25. Bulls trying to put it in L4 low, breaking out of the wedge. Would really like to see a bit of a stronger reversal or something, though. We've only gone past the open by about 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Yeah, the 125 is crazy fast today. The thing is, yesterday it wasn't doing anything, you know? I mean, it was just going straight up, and maybe that was the problem, but... You know, maybe the 250, if we're going to be zooming in a little bit closer. Either way, we've got an L4 reversal off of the lows. Ooh, lordy. Nice little L1 push for an L1 continuation to the upside. Nice quick little dip, too, for buyers to pick up a nice little snap. Pulse into the highs. Targets off for the L1. I don't have time to do the stops and targets right now. This is too freaking fast. We're just going to have to keep going with it. This is a nice L1 continuation after the L4 reversal off the lows. They're following the patterns perfectly so far. We've got the L1 into an L1, which held. Now we're dipping back. These buyers are trying to hold an L1, but if they fail, the 2's the zone. And this is starting to turn into a bit of a disappointing turn for the bulls. Yeah, we should... You know what we should do? Man, you know what would be really interesting? I really like that idea. Isn't there a way to put a heart rate monitor on screen? That might not be a good idea with all my caffeine in the morning, though. That's going to look like I'm having a seizure. It'd be really fun to see what your heart rate is when, like, at a couple minutes ago, as an example, when I'm down 100 ticks, what's my heart doing? I'm curious now. I may have to buy an Apple Watch or whatever. Nice continuation to the upside, but it's off of an L3. The bulls wanted the L1. This is a disappointing turn of events, so even if it does make it back up to the highs, well... more likely going to be slightly disappointing. The S&P is still grinding to the downside. Alright, I was hoping I could use that, but I can't. I'm going to go back here. 45,210 is the POC. Nice bull continuation back to the upside, demonstrating some strength off of the L3s, which means that the L2s are going to be the zone of interest for bulls. Wow, that snapped down a heck of a lot faster than I was anticipating. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to jump ship. That thing went absolutely freaking crazy. Holy crap. Okay, so what I was originally looking for, and this immediately tells me I need to slow down the chart, is we had the L4 rotation into the L1 continuation to the upside. Then the L3, which held into, which I was looking for, an L1, and then it went absolutely bonkers down to an L3. I have no reason being long anymore. That all happened in seconds. So let's bump this to a 250. Let's bump this to a 250. It's going to make my other entries look a bit stupid, but that's fine. This will hopefully... This feels like it's not slowing anything down. It is a little bit, I guess. We don't have a bajillion candles on deck. Alright, let's see what they want to do. Starting to rotate to the downside. I'm going to keep a 500 tick off screen and see how that looks too. We might just end up going back to the 500 for days like this, at least. 500 seems like it's still a bit slow. Maybe 250 is the sweet spot. I don't know. We'll see. Got an L4 reversal off of the lows. In terms of a zone of interest, we're still hovering around this area. They've got a little bit of time left to complete this candle. Not much. About 3-4 minutes. Now, if this candle closes down here, we're hovering in the middle of no man's land. And trying to go for longs is going to be incredibly dangerous. This looks more engaged compared to yesterday. Yeah, exactly. There's a bit more action. The 125 might be too much, but maybe the 250 is a nice little sweet spot. POC is on the downswing on the S&P. The market's trying to get underneath it, but so far has not been able to close underneath it. If we're looking at the NASDAQ, the market is still underneath theirs, but if we migrate this further forward, we can see that they haven't been able to close underneath it either. We've got two L2s in the sequence. For the shorts, that is. Now we can see the impulse POC was lost at 555. So if the bulls are going to show up, they need to show up soon. That's a really nice POC break for the attempt. I'm going to look to see if I can get a scalper's attempt to the upside. Yeah, right there. Okay, good enough. Jeez, oh, Pete. I don't even have time to freaking think on this thing. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, now it's gone. So we've got that POC shift. It was a fantastic POC shift. I only had a chance to get one in and try to get the risk on the table to figure out where we're going for a target, and it was already gone. Really, really nice rotation, though. We are getting a nice continuation off of that low, which is, in this case, an L4. Bulls will be looking to rifle off of this L1 for a continuation pulse to the upside. It's a relatively weak high. And that break right there is not what I wanted. I'm out. They failed the rotation. So when they fail the rotation like that, I have no business being long anymore. I'm trying to get the rotations, but the POCs are the ones that are offering up the actionable zones right now. Let's see if we can get a bit more confirmation here. The problem is these breaks are really terrible. It's like a 2-candle reversal on the highs. So the L4 trying to get the L1 going. I guess technically it never did hit the L2. But again, I want the strict pattern. Hold the top of the L1. Don't be doing this kind of crap. If the bulls are going to take it, we need a stronger break. We need this thing to like actually crack a high. And it looks like all the bulls are giving up right now. Ooh. Hang on just a second now. This POC zone right here for the shorts to try to pressure back down is the zone of interest. Primarily because if they don't reverse this back to the downside off of this, the risk doesn't have to be really much at all. And a bull bar back up tells me to get out. So I was trying to get the bulls running for cover and looking for that to be a parabolic drop. The reason I like that zone is because it offers up close to a 6-to-1 back to the downside. But more than that, when you offer it up on the 15-minute chart and realize that they've got about 100 points to the downside still open. I really, really like this area, but they've got to give a little more proof. I'll give them one more shot. I don't mind going for 2, but the third time, it's game over. Couldn't get filled on the second one, taking the stop on the final. All right, not giving it any more chances to try to get the reversal off of this low. I've got to wait for more information. It's incredibly sloppy, but... You can see, I don't have a reason to be short anymore. You know, like, they have a chance, but no thanks. S&P sellers still maintaining underneath the 45.19's POC. Now they have closed underneath the POC. Let's Let's see what they're able to do this time around. Very sensitive area here around there. Ooh, POC popping up too. 555 quarter. Now with this POC shift and the way that the market is responding to this, I really like this area for a shot for the bulls again. This is a different style of pattern, so I don't mind going back in again with the mentality of trying to get this upswing going for the bulls. Now if the bulls fail here, then it's a very reasonable expectation to expect the shorts are going to try to take this. I couldn't get a fill up there on the shorts. And again, the reason why I like the short is how much open territory we have to the downside. Well, that POC test happened very quickly. Oh, great, and I got a really terrible fill. Okay. Well, I'm going to see if they can give me a slightly better way to optimize this entry. Golly. POC shifting down a little bit. Market maintaining underneath. This is the shot. Back up, coming back down, seeing how they respond to it. Having a difficult time again. I do really like this zone for the bull or for the bears. The bulls are getting really trapped in this zone. The thing is, where we are, and the reason why I like the short bias is how much open space we've got to the downside. It's ludicrous how much open space there is, but they're forcing traders to short at the base. This is obviously a range, and I'm getting progressively chopped up inside of the range, so I've got to implement a bit more patience here and try to favor entries that are a bit further up if I'm going to maintain the short bias. Now, the one thing that I do want to be cognizant of, because I am going to be approaching this with a slight bit more in terms of patience, is looking for the if the bulls do rally up, as an example, and we break above the highs, I want to see that responsiveness, not necessarily on that first pulse, because we'll likely still find a lot of sellers, earlier long stuck, etc., to get another backswing. But that next pullback, that's the one that's a big interest. We're back under the POC again. Ooh, big jump to the upside. I'll reduce risk just a little bit because it's offering up a chance to. Closing back underneath the POC. I love all this open territory to the downside. Bulls are stuck on a really, really bad spot here. And now we're starting to shift back below the POC. Nice little spot for first objectives. Continuation pulsing to the downside, though. Remember, this thing's staring off the edge of a cliff right now. Downside objectives all the way down to potentially the 450s, 460s. Now watch this area, because if the sellers fail here, this could be a really strong bullish reversal point. The sellers have to hold here. Okay, that's a really good start. Very good start. So that's the kind of conviction that we need to see to maintain the strength to the downside. We broke underneath the low. We came back near the POC. The sellers are still pushing down. The bulls are still running scared. POC shifting lower. Beautiful pulse into lower sided support, looking for the follow through now to break down through the lows and keep this train going. Now watch this POC in the 50s. This is a valid bear attempt. The sellers have to maintain the pressure. They need to keep pushing this. There we go. Oh man, if they break a new swing low underneath 35, it's game over. The bulls are done. Remember, they're staring off the edge of a cliff. The bulls know it, and they also, remember, bulls also know that they have incredibly low risk. Right? They're on the other side of this. I have to maintain high risk to try to hold these shorts because the stop would have to be like way up in the stratosphere to make it work. So, you know, there's a give and a take. The bulls have incredibly low risk with a very high reward potential, but their probability sucks. My probability is great because I have to risk more. It's a give and a take. Watch this 555. They're testing the POC. Immediately backed off it again. Good resistance. Sellers still showing the pressure. Really good indication that the bulls still have slippery fingers. How big of a cliff are they going to go sliding down is the question. Final objective is going to be down here in the 2150s for the 5-to-1 to see if they can drive down, but we're hovering around these 3-to-1s. We're seeing the sellers definitely take charge, and they're continuing this drive. Still no break of the lows. There we go. We're testing the 5-to-1 targets here, and we're bouncing. I'm going to take the 5-to-1 and just call it a day. Nice cycle to the downside. If I had more, then maybe hold for more, but I'm not going to turn away from a 5-to-1 move. It finally gave us the slide. Finally. Woo! Now, the next thing that I want to look at here in the nearer picture, because we do finally have an actual breakdown. This is a really funky transition in here. Gross. Well, they got an L5 into an L2. Technically, they got an L3, so that kind of sucks. After the L3, they did follow through with another L1, though, so we don't necessarily have any structure or any proof or anything to try to hold on for more than a 5-to-1 at the moment, but remember, that big POC is still hanging out down here at 32.25, but they're just not breaking away. Nice cycle. Those buy the new low algos are killer, yeah. We've got 4 minutes until top of the hour at 10 o'clock. Feel free to get those questions in. We'll get those covered for you. Market's not really doing much of anything yet. hovering around. We don't have any patterns per se. Looking across the board here, the euro hasn't pulled back enough for the L2. The crude oil hasn't pulled back enough for the L2. There's nothing really happening yet. All right, well, we'll let it do its thing. Got a nice continuation to the downside, although relatively disappointing in terms of structure. If we zoom out a little bit further, we've got the cycle to the downside from the way bigger perspective, which was in L2, down into technically another L2, really gross looking L2, but technically. Then we've got another L1 into an L1. So we've got two different repetitions going on. We've got a larger L1, which is the more frequent one. That's the one that's hit more recently. But then the bigger L2, which is suggesting that it would make more sense to see a larger corrective phase up into the 70s to 83s. It's becoming more and more difficult to stay short. You can see I got mangled inside of there, but... didn't pick up on the range soon enough. Market still churning to the downside. Zooming in a little closer to gauge the overall where we're at. The bigger move, I'm curious, from way up at the top to these new lows that they're actually going to be creating here in just a second. That POC is also back at 550. Yikes! So, here's the thing, right? I want to go long. I want to be a bull. We're hanging off the edge of a cliff with our feet dangling, right? This is not the time to be going long with this much risk. A trader could go long here, but you have to realize what kind of trader you are. Sorry, I bit my tongue. If you're a buyer here, where's your risk? Right? Well, if I'm gonna be a buyer here, my stop's got to go like down here, or down here. There's not much of a difference at that point. So what are you then? Well, you've got to be a scalper. That's the only thing you could be if you're risking that much. Now, if you're waiting for the market to get down a little bit further towards like 32.25, that still doesn't necessarily give up a... Does it do a 2-to-1? It doesn't even fit a 2-to-1. So, I mean, really, in order to even get a 2-to-1 to fit inside of this structure, they've got to get to the lower bounds of where all of this volume began building up around that POC, and that's around the 400s. In order for the bulls to take over, they have to at least get above the 550s. That's the POC. Would like to see, you know, like this type reversal. It's been consolidating for ages. I have to assume that there's a metric ton of longs who are built in here just aren't getting targets. Which is why these shorts are working so nicely when they finally do let loose. All right, we are going past 10 o'clock. Not seeing any other questions coming in, so that's going to do it for the morning session. Let's transition over into the extended session, and then we'll see what else we can find. All right, so that'll do it. Hopefully, you had a great morning so far. Got chopped up in the range a little bit, but overall making things work. Kind of a messy, sloppy morning to the downside with the bulls getting trapped. Very interesting to see if we can get back above these 550s, though. Either way, hopefully you had a great morning, and yeah, rest up, and we'll see you all tomorrow. For the rest of you who are hanging out for the extended session or on the VIP side, just chill for a second, and we'll transition. So have a good one. We'll talk to y'all later. Thanks.